said that you was leaving. Now why would you wanna do that, oh baby? 'Cause if it's your
Over breakfast about all things that have gone on here, and somebody brought up a really interesting point that they wonder if the reason why Hawaii has become so liberal and there hasn't been this charge of people that are pursuing information is because traditionally people that have lived on this island have always been ruled by a king and a queen. And when I think about liberals and I think about Democrats, I think of their policies. It's like, do what I say because I said so, and there's no logic that follows it. Vote for me because you're black and because I said so. Right? You're not, as a Hispanic person, allowed to be anything but a Democrat because I said so, right? But if you actually look at their policies, it makes no sense. And so what they were, suggesting to me is that Hawaii suffers from the fact that they are so used to being ruled by a monarchy, and that's why I wanted to come here to remind you guys that you no longer live in a monarchy. The past does not matter, the future does. You are one of the 50 states of the greatest country in the entire world. It's time to get involved, it's time to listen to the policies, and it's time to understand, question, I guess, your allegiance to a party that certainly has not served you whatsoever. Period. That's why we're here.
Sarah,
What's your name? Randall is why my cousin. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We're going to keep moving on picture time right to the next event, okay?
Tag me on Insta. Okay. Absolutely.
Candace, Charlie, I wanted you guys to meet Ron Curtis.
Nice to see you. Nominated, I think it's amazing for this whole great. And pretty good feeling here.
You're so tall. May I take a picture with you?
Thank you.
Candace, you have to give me. We have to keep her moving.
Oh, amazing. Congrats.
Grab my hand.
I'm here with tonight down at the Republican Party, and here's Cam Cavazzo and his beautiful wife, Tula. Did you want to say anything about the race for the people at home?
Oh, yeah. This race is about balance in Hawaii. We're bringing home the balance. Let's send a Republican Congress and get some representation that really helps our state.
Awesome. We'll catch more, and I'm going to interview you guys. You can talk more in detail about it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Well, it's my new friend Kevin Jordan discussing about how we can bring high tech here to help improve the economy of Hawaii. He's got some really good ideas, and I'm taking notes and we're bringing it back to our campaign.
Awesome. So nice to meet you, Kevin, and thank you for sharing and helping this, all happen. Thank you.
We're trying to win the hearts and minds of Hawaii. Hopefully we all got a great lesson. The next speaker needs no introduction. If you saw him at the University of Hawaii yesterday, he dismantled any liberal argument that came his way. He doesn't need an introduction. He and Candace rocked it. Charlie Kirk from Turning Point, please.
Hello everyone, thank you so much. Steve, only had more energy, that would be helpful. What an honor it is to be here. It's also my 50th state, so I've been to every state now. It's so much fun, Steve. So thank you for allowing both of us to get that done. I'm born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, so Steve and I have that in common as well. The fun thing about being from Illinois is we have term limits in Illinois. A little bit different than most states, though. It's one term in office, one term in jail. So when we asked for our former governor's cell number, we actually mean cell number. We have more former governors in prison than not in prison. I remember early on in my political experience, we were trying to plan a Lincoln-Reagan Day dinner, and we were going through all the people we could have to give the invitation. We said, did Governor Ryan do it? No, he's still serving his time. We went through all this. Do we have any Republican governors that are not currently in prison? So that was the challenge. My grandmother was a lifelong Republican from the north side of Chicago. She passed away in the mid-1990s, and she's been voting Democrat ever since. You might ask, how on earth is a kid from Chicago, doing what I'm doing? And yesterday was such an unbelievable experience. I just first want to say thank you for the hospitality that everyone has shown us the last couple of days. Our amazing chapter at University of Hawaii, raise your hand please, all the work that you're doing. Give it up for them, by the way. What they are doing is so unbelievable. Oh boy. I felt like I was in Saigon or something. It was unbelievable. We'll get to that later. So, I started this organization, Turning Point USA, when I was 18 years old. Previous to that, it was my lifelong ambition to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point. I was Eagle Scout football, basketball captain. My whole life was trying to go to West Point. I did not get in. I was nominated but not accepted. And it was the best thing that never happened to me. I then went to my parents and I persuaded them to allow me 6 months off before entering college. I said, give me 6 months to try to recapture the hearts and minds of the country and the organized students around free markets and limited government. Just 6 months. They said, yeah, okay, sure. It's been a long 6 months. It's been 6.5 years. And we're now on 1,300 college and high school campuses across the country, including here. Thousands of students passed through our training programs. Over 1,200 young women came to our Young Women's Leadership Summit. We'll have 5,000 students at our year-end conference in Palm Beach. We have the nation's largest Young Latino Leadership Summit, high school leadership conference, regional conferences all across the country. And we are fighting for 3 big things. And I don't think they are controversial subjects, mind you. It was really funny yesterday on campus, the amount of intensity and hatred they have towards me. I would think that I was talking about something that was so radically divisive. I stand for 3 things. I say America is indeed the greatest country ever to exist.
Amen.
Nope. Number 2, that the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written here in Washington. Number 3, free enterprise capitalism is the most moral, proven, and effective economic system ever discovered to lift most people out of poverty and prosperity. Those are not political issues, by the way. It used to be that both parties agreed on those 3 big things, and then they might have had differences on size and scope of government, social policy. The number one thing I want you to take away tonight, if anything, is we are not fighting the Democrat Party in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. Growing up in Chicago, in a very liberal environment, I was told to always give the Democrats the benefit of the doubt. Meaning, they want what we want, they just have a different way to get there. They love America just as much as you do, but they just want a different tax rate. And I hear this all the time. I hear this on cable news. Oh, we have more in common than what divides us. And I think that's mostly true amongst the followers of the Democrats. But I no longer believe the Democrats have this country's best interest at heart.
That's right.
They hate the idea of America. And I saw it firsthand yesterday at the University of Hawaii, where I had more college students say America was never great. Screw colonialism. This country's the worst thing that's ever existed. And I wish that was an isolated incident. What's going on in this country now is you have one political movement that is thankful to live in America, and one that is angry to live in America. There's no justification to be angry to live in the greatest country ever to exist. You should be kissing the ground and say, thank you, God, for giving me the opportunity to live in this great country where if I make good choices, I take responsibility for myself, I can reap those rewards, and my visions and my dreams can come true. And only in this country is that possible. Yet, in our university system, they don't educate, they train activists. And they go right to the hearts and minds of a generation that has been told through many different cultural influences that they're a victim. That they are entitled to something because they exist. And life's hard lesson is, well, life is suffering, and you're not entitled to anything. For those of you that have been around, that have served in the military, thank you for your service. For those of you that have been through strife or difficult times, you understand that meaning in life comes from responsibility. It doesn't come from limitless freedom. It doesn't come from staying up all night or going to another party or blaming someone else for your problems. But instead, there's an entire political party now that is talking mostly to young people, but the entire population. No, because you're a woman, you're oppressed. Because of your skin color, you deserve something. Because of your sexual orientation, you're being oppressed. Without any sort of factual evidence or data. And I saw this firsthand. on campus, and I see it every day, where students that have the world at their fingertips, that could accomplish anything that they could possibly imagine, are using their energy and their time and their resources to tell me that they're a victim. And my favorite example of this is when I spoke with Candace Owens, who's spectacular, by the way. I work for her now. I spoke at, we're the only conservative dude ever speak at Stanford, UC Berkeley, and UCLA within a month and lived in Taliban. So, when we went to Berkeley, we had to get escorted by what the equivalent would be like a state-run militia in some Central American country, because obviously we're such controversial figures. At Stanford, I'm going to reiterate that again, at Stanford, I had a student pop up, and they asked a question, and they said to Candace, "You don't know what it's like to be a black person in America." I said, lesson number one, a black conservative is not considered to be a black person to the left, because they have betrayed their blackness as soon as they became a conservative. It's an unbelievably racist idea, by the way, because they believe that every person that is black must think a certain way. That's how you enslave an entire portion of the population based on really bad ideas. Nevertheless, he said that, and he said, "I'm a victim of racism and oppression." I said, "Hold on, time out." I said, "I didn't go to college, but we're at Stanford." Stanford. Oh, you don't understand. It's so hard. God, go to Stanford. What about the world? You could literally accomplish anything you want. And by the way, you did get in, right? I mean, racism obviously was an object, a barrier for you to get in. And the conversation went back and forth when finally Candace said, "I believe in you, that you can accomplish your dreams, and I want you to have the freedom, the flexibility, and the freedom from government to be able to accomplish anything you want." And he was so programmed to oppose anything that we said. For example, we could have said, "Oh, beautiful, wonderful action." He would have, it's like, no matter what we would have said, he would have opposed it. And he said, "Stop it, no, I don't want you to say that." And then finally Candace said, "Fine, I don't believe in you." It's like, "Thank you." Like, what? How bizarre is this? You don't want us to believe in you? Which brings to a really interesting point. They have created a badge of righteousness behind victimhood. And the story of Western civilization and the story of America is being a victor, not a victim. Is that you can flee communism and have a really screwed up life and say, "I'm going to make good choices and I'm going to create something better," because I actually might be a victim of something. See, Western civilization is such a short period of time, we take it for granted, that for most of human history, people lived under serfs and kings and monarchs. And then the greatest political revolution in world history happened in resistance to Great Britain, and it started the greatest country ever to exist. The first political revolution, by the way, where the winners voluntarily gave up political power. They could have created the Washingtonian, Jeffersonian, and Franklin monarchy and ruling class, and the people of the colonies of America would not have known any different. They would have said, "Oh yeah, this is what we're used to." Instead, they created the greatest political document ever to exist, the Constitution, which, first and foremost, number one, it's not rules for us, the people, it's rules for government. It's rules for the government to prevent government from coming into our life to say, government cannot tell you what to say. And it acknowledges that you have these rights naturally, this idea of natural rights upon birth, that government did not give you these rights, therefore government cannot take them away. So we, the people, must have protections against government abusing them. What makes the Constitution so unique is they wrote a blueprint for government behind distrust of government, where the blueprint was, this is probably going to get screwed up, so what can we do to prevent it from happening? Because they studied the Romans, they studied the Greeks, and they studied the Chinese, and they lived under the British, and they even studied the Mesopotamians, all across the world. And they realized that times change, technology advances, but human beings do not change. And they realized human beings were broken and fallen by nature, and that when people form a system of government, the same pattern repeats itself. A charismatic, military-driven leader will assume power, promise some benevolence to the citizens, and eventually exercise massive abuse upon the people. They said, what can we do to defy history? And so they resisted power. They resisted what would have made their lives pretty comfortable and even more luxurious, and they brought the power back to the American people. Extraordinary. And because of that, you saw the greatest political advancement in world history, where basically every Western country copied the U.S. Constitution. Human flourishment went up, where life expectancy skyrocketed exponentially, and economic activity followed with that, so on and so forth. But in our schools and our universities, the story is quite different. Anti-Americanism is growing so quickly in this country that I find myself, first and foremost, not having to convince what is going to make America great again, but instead having to convince students were we ever great at all. And so the question, when Andrew Cuomo went up to the podium and he said, America was never great, and people gasped, I say, I hear that every single day from professors. I hear that every single day from the people that are tasked to teach the next 30 million members of Generation Z. Because if there's one sentence that our generation is being taught, we're being taught that America is a racist, bigoted, homophobic country that illegally stole the lands from indigenous people to colonize this land to benefit the white supremacist majority, which also happens to be misogynist. That's U.S. history in one sentence. Which is, of course, completely and totally untrue and a misrepresentation of who we are. You know how I like to tell the story of America in a short soundbite? People that fled suffering to create a better life for themselves and those they cared about, who made good choices, who went to places they never thought existed, to go die for the freedoms of others and people they never knew, to come back to a land and not ask for anything in return except for the land to bury our undead, to give back generously and ask for nothing in return, and to lead in science and medicine, technology and music and sports and ideas that has created the world to be the safest, most prosperous that it ever has been, thanks to the greatest country ever to exist. And so, this is the divide now, folks. The political war is important. I hope there's a red wave, Steve. I sure hope so. You know, by the way, I hope Nancy Pelosi continues to be the spokeswoman of the Democratic Party. Along with Mad Max. Don't you love Mad Max? Oh, she's something else. Peach 45, right? Yeah, jeez. Oh, moly. She is a low IQ individual, I can tell you what. We would not put up with that in the Republican Party, would we? I'll tell you what. Oh my goodness. I hope there's a red wave. I'm very worried about Democrats assuming more political power. See, when you fight the left like I fight, I spent 4.5 hours at a university yesterday looking into the eyes of exactly the base of the Democrat Party. You get to know them really well. I give 200 speeches a year. I'm on the road 340 days a year, and about 85 to 90 of them are at college campuses. You do that for 6 years straight, you get to know the enemy really, really well. Number one thing I learned about the left is they don't want, the far left I should say, which is now the base of the Democrat Party. They don't want to make choices for themselves, they'd rather tell you how to live your life. It's the number one most important thing. That they're much more worried about sociological revolution and external blame than internal reflection and individual improvement. Instead of saying, I'm going to wake up earlier and stop drinking, make better choices, get a job, get married before I have kids, and not commit crimes, they'll say that the justice system is rigged against colored, people of color. They're going to say that it's impossible for people like me to succeed, and until we overthrow that status quo, I'm not even going to try. So that's the first thing. The second thing you'll learn about the left is they're obsessed with dividing people. One of my favorite quotes in America that has defined us is E pluribus unum, which I love the Hawaiian chant. Essentially, when you're here, we're all Hawaiians. But E pluribus unum means out of many, one. That we don't look at skin color or background or religion or philosophy or even political party, but we are all Americans. The left does not believe that. They are obsessed with what divides us. Black Lives Matter, LGBT, the patriarchy is the fault of everything that's going on, is at fault. They're focusing on things that will naturally divide people instead of unite them. And when that happens, and when you allow it to continue to happen, then we that actually love America have no choice but then to fight back. And amen. The third thing you'll learn about the American left, which is something that I'm sure all of you will know, is they would much rather complain about a problem than solve it. And I'm sure you've seen this in Hawaii once or twice, is that the most important thing to a leftist is political power. For us conservatives, for us libertarians, or whatever you are, if you love America, just, you're not a leftist, let's put it that way. And there's a difference between a liberal and a leftist, I'll get to that in a second. Big difference. Is that they'd much rather complain about an issue than actually find a way to solve it, because their identity is in the political power of trying to divide people. I will submit one piece of evidence. The Congressional Black Caucus that sat when Trump announced the lowest ever black unemployment rate. They looked angry. They looked upset. They looked as if something was taken away from them, because it was. Do you know what was taken away from them? Control of those communities. Because Democrats need people to need them. We judge success by how many people get off government benefits and into work. They judge success by how many people are continuing to vote for them because of how much stuff they give away. Democrats will give you just enough stuff to keep you crawling back to the ballot box every 2 years. Republicans will give you the opportunity so you don't have to worry about who you're voting for, but instead, the opportunity in front of you. Because for us, politics is not the most important thing. The last lesson about the American left is that for those of us, people say, what are you? You'll say you're an American. You'll say you're a Christian. You'll say you're a father. You'll say you're a mother. I'm a grandfather. I'm a husband. I'm a wife. But on campus, the most important thing to them is their political identity. See, yesterday, they'll introduce themselves. I'm a Marxist. Great. I'm a leftist. I'm a liberal. I'm an activist. I'm a social justice warrior. Because that becomes their identity. That's who they are. And there's a reason for this. I believe at the very basic level, this is more than even a political battle, as I said. It's more than a cultural battle. It's now become a spiritual battle. And yesterday I had a young man really get upset that I talked that God is real. And God is real. And He is ubiquitous and all-powerful. And God is love. You don't have to subscribe to any particular religious doctrine. But if you admit that there's a higher power, then more times than not, you'll fall more in our political lane. And so when these students start to say the first and foremost thing, I'm a leftist, I'm a Marxist, I'm this, so you can take away the idea of God from a young person, but you can't take away for their search for meaning. Because every human being is going to try to find some connection, some form of meaning to plug themselves into. And so because of this, the American left is quite smart. They know, they advance the idea of atheism almost like a religion. There's more self-identified atheists in college right now than self-identified Christians. That's a fact. I hear more about students with hatred of God, and they boo God, the Democrats boo God on their convention floor, than actual appreciation of it. What happens when you remove God from the equation? Well, then you become the most important person in the room. And there's no judgment. There's no person holding you accountable. You can make whatever decision you see fit. And it also happens when you remove God, you still need some form of something to plug into, and that's where government comes in. See, every major Marxist totalitarian government went after the churches and after the faith-based institutions all throughout the 20th century. Because as soon as people had a way to plug into a higher power, then government was not the most important thing. And so I look at our generation, and I see the rise of Marxism and the rise of atheism be directly connected. So I have some fun. 3 things to say to an atheist. You ready for this? Number 1, this really frustrates them. That's why I start with it. Without God, there would be no atheists. Number two, probably most important. No, the third is most important. I'll ask a question. Do you hope you're wrong? To an atheist. It's a question they've never heard before. And those that say no, those that say, no, I hope I'm correct. I hope there is no God. I say, wow, that's a really difficult existence. You hope you'll never see your loved ones again? You hope that this was all just by chance? You hope there's no ultimate justice? You hope that there's no love in the world that's beyond, the horror and the suffering around you? And that you value you being right more than the hope of something bigger? But when an atheist says, you know what, I hope I'm wrong, but I think I'm right, then there's an opening. Then we just have a disagreement on the details. But most atheists will say, I hope I'm right, which goes to the exact core of what is wrong with all of it, is that they value themselves over more than anything else. The final thing that I say to an atheist, and it's quite fun. First I say, without God there would be no atheists. I ask, do you hope you're wrong? And then finally, when I really break it down, I say, I do not have enough faith to be an atheist. Because I think it takes a lot more faith to believe everything that we know to be true and that we experience, and the connection and the biology and the physics and the math that ties our entire physical world together is all by mistake. And then if you think that's an act of randomness, you have a lot more faith than I do. Because I think it's much more rational, much more logical to believe that there was a creator behind all of this than to believe that someone rolled the dice and that we're here by mistake. So in closing, as I do, I won't catch a flight. The battle for Western civilization and the battle for the world is happening right now in American college campuses. Today, there were students that had to sit through a lecture hall that heard that America is the worst country ever to exist. As I give this speech right now, there's some student probably staying up late writing a term paper by why capitalism is the worst thing. 51% of millennials think socialism is a better alternative than capitalism. If socialism is so great, why do people flee Havana, Cuba to Miami, but I don't see a lot of people fleeing Miami for Havana, Cuba? If socialism is so great, why are the guns pointed in one direction, in the North Korean and South Korean border? If socialism was so great, why did 100 million civilians meet their graves over the last 100 years involuntarily under the guise of bettering the people in 100 countries and 100 experiments? They say that socialism was never tried. It was tried 100 times on all 6 continents, from Zimbabwe to Afghanistan to the Eastern Bloc of Europe to the Korean Peninsula. So it's not culture that prevents communism from working, it's human nature. Because the pursuit of utopia never ends well. So the divide is quite simple. Do you believe people are good or bad by nature? It doesn't have to be an absolute. But if you believe people are generally broken by nature, then stop trying to create something that's perfect, because that's never going to happen. The genius of the Founding Fathers is they realized that they're broken by nature, so we're not going to create utopia. We're going to create something that works pretty well, so don't screw it up with a lot of checks and balances. And the humility of that is extraordinary. Because almost every other ruler and king, from the pharaohs to Napoleon to Alexander the Great, they said to the people, I'm going to create perfection. I'm going to create utopia. Founding Fathers said, no, not going to happen. Things are still going to be pretty rough, but we're just going to make it so it's a little bit better. But you're going to have to take responsibility for yourself. First time in human history it's ever happened. So I embark on this journey, taking a red-eye flight tonight. I'm going to be visiting campuses, storming for the midterm elections, fighting the cultural, political war, and the spiritual war all at once. We're on 1,300 college campuses. We did our part here in Hawaii. I'm now banned, I think, from the university. And the university president had to write a letter saying those aren't the university values or something like that. Strange. But if we lose this next generation, it doesn't matter who is in charge of Congress. If this trajectory continues, America will be completely and totally unrecognized. But here's my piece of optimism and hope for you is yesterday that was the biggest event in the University of Hawaii's history from what I've been told. Hundreds of students came out to hear what we had to say. And it's not that students are opposed to what we have to say, it is that they have never been exposed to these ideas at all. And that is intentional. It's because the left knows when debate and dialogue and discussion is allowed to exist, that we win. The left has feelings. We have facts, reason, logic, history, principle, reflection of human nature, and an understanding that things are not going to be perfect, but if we make good decisions and good choices, they can be better tomorrow than they were today, and what lessons can we learn from today to make sure that tomorrow is better. And the left, the American left today, not liberal is a big difference, the American left today, they embody the worst parts of the fascists and the Marxists together to try to silence opposing opinion, to silence speech, and to try to prevent people like myself from even being able to come on college campuses. Because the left hates the idea that there are other ideas. I fight to my death for the right for a socialist to be wrong. I love when socialists come on campus. It gives me the opportunity to talk to the students afterwards and give them another point of view. For 6 years I've been doing this. Almost daily, one of our chapters tries to get kicked off campus. They're trying to do that now at the University of Hawaii, wonderful tolerant leftists. Almost daily, they try to prevent me from even stepping foot on a campus. They pull fire alarms, they interrupt my speeches, which happened yesterday. They come with ridiculous signs, they smear me, they misrepresent me, they call me a white supremacist, a Nazi, they call Candace a white supremacist, which I can't figure out. And yet, not once have I seen a conservative student or conservative student group or faculty member or board member try to prevent a liberal from coming on a college campus. If our ideas were so bad, then let us speak and no one will show up. If our ideas were so unpopular, let us speak and more people will leave our speech hating us than liking us. If our ideas were so bad, then put us front center stage in front of the whole university and then you'll turn everyone into leftists. If our ideas were so bad, then give us the biggest platform possible. But the left, they know that what happened yesterday is a threat to them. That when 600 and 700 students come up and they hear something they're not supposed to hear, they might not be card-carrying Marxists anymore. And they might lose what they hold near and dear. The most important thing to a leftist is political control and power. The Republican Party was founded breaking people out of ideological and actual slavery. The Democrats have always been the party of controlling people. They don't control people physically anymore, but they do control them intellectually and politically. See, we as Republicans and conservatives believe that the individual capacity to think should not be dictated by skin color, but it should be character. That skin color is irrelevant, that race is a social construct. The left is obsessed with those things. And so as I go on this fight, I'll never forget what happened here in Hawaii. I live in a similar state. That is, what's the expression? Left of San Francisco and right of Pyongyang. But I can tell you that if you stop fighting, then you give them exactly what they want. And sometimes successes have to be many decades long. Sometimes it has to be inch by inch and yard by yard. But if you would have told me 2 years ago that we'd, as you eloquently said, we'd have a president that moved an embassy, cut corporate taxes, had a GDP rate where it is, ending the Korean War, I would say no way. And so, God works in rather mysterious ways.
Amen.
But you gotta fight. That's right. You're not gonna give us our country back.
That's right.
And I'm honored to be in this fight with all of you. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone. So, many people fight. He literally came here with no money from the Republican Party to share his views with us, to go visit the University of Hawaii campus, and he is going to run out. So thank you for giving him a round of applause. I don't think that too many people are going to be able to stop him because he's got to get on that flight. But thank you very much, sir. So how do you see why we put this program together, right? It's the hearts and minds. The hearts and minds of Hawaii is at stake here. And this is the fight that we're saying. Charlie and I sat together, Stephen and I sat together, and this fight is inch by inch, yard by yard for sure. We can't forget why we're here, not only to honor our Constitution, but to honor our candidates. So everyone here, again, please go up to a candidate and sign up. But I would like to introduce our minority leader, who happens to be running for governor, Andrea Tavola.
Have you enjoyed yourself tonight? If you guys liked the speeches, if you felt moved, if you heard something that you like, put your hands together. Because tonight, I think it has some really useful that we should use, that we should think about. And I wanted to say first off, Carol wanted to remind me, Carol Thomas, that these beautiful centerpieces are for you to take. She doesn't want to leave it at the table, so go ahead and the most good-looking person, give it to the person on your right. Take it all. So thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for all